slate there. I don't take your time lightly at all. I know it is the day before public holiday, and I've also been on trainings where, or rather missed trainings where I wanted to join them, but for one reason or another, something happened and I forgot about it, or I lost interest, or just life took over. So I really do appreciate your time and your effort being here, because you can always get your money back. You can find another way of getting your energy back, but getting your time back is something that you can't ever get. So thank you for joining me on this. So to keep it really straightforward and to the point, let's jump straight into this Overcoming Anxiety and Overwhelm Masterclass. Hi, I am Zen, for those of you that don't know me, and I support female solopreneurs, leaders, and high performers to be their best selves, whatever that may look like for them. I'm a coffee lover, an avid reader, a personal development addict, and I'm here to help you to get your drive back. It's that time of the year when stresses tend to accumulate, our energy begins to deplete, and burnout is lurking around the corner. So I want to just give this masterclass to you to give you some tools to be able to navigate this time of change. And the cold weather and everything, I know our energies tend to dip a little bit and you tend to layer up. So I'm just going to invite you here to play at a level 10 with me, which means just to be interactive, to give this your attention and your focus, and I guarantee you what you put into this is what you'll get right out. So think about this for a second before you jump in. How much information is there online about managing your anxiety? There's so much information, right? We actually have to run away from this information because it's actually coming at us from so many different angles. So in terms of finding information, in terms of handling anxiety, that's not a difficult thing to do if you really do think about that. So information doesn't lead to transformation. It's not having more information about what anxiety is and what causes anxiety and what leads to panic attacks and all these things, or even tools about how to overcome these things. Information doesn't lead to transformation. It's only insight and action that lead to transformation. So I'm not going to be spending too much time breaking down what anxiety is, what causes it. I'm 100% sure that you either know this information or you can quickly find that information. What I want you to even think about is right here, right now, what are some of the ways? You can either type this in the chat, or you can just say it out loud, or just think it to yourself. What are some of the ways that right here, right now, just think of 3 ways of managing anxiety? If you do have anxiety, what are some of the ways that you could manage your anxiety right here, right now? So as I say, you can feel, if you want to put this in the chat, that's fine as well. So some of the ways that you can manage anxiety are things like exercise, breath work along the lines of meditation. You could go for therapy or coaching. There are so many different ways we can manage anxiety. So for me, it's not a question of do you know what to do? It's a question of, are you doing what you know? Are you doing what it is that you know in terms of how to manage it? So of these things that you've thought of or mentioned, how often are you actually doing these things? How often are you practicing these things? And if you're not practicing these things that you know will help you to manage anxiety, why? That's what I'm more interested in right now. Because me giving you more information, if you're not using the information, is this going to be more information for you not to use? That makes sense, right? So why haven't you done these things? Because you haven't practiced it. There's this concept for pressure cooker. Now, pressure cooker, what it does is it builds up using steam. It cooks using steam, and this steam is enclosed within this pot. So when the steam builds up and that heat builds up, it helps the contents of the pot to cook quicker. What happens is that sometimes so much steam will build up that it needs to release that steam, and the valve will pop up and all that steam goes out, right? And then the pressure inside the pressure cooker goes back down. And then the valve will go down, and then what happens to the pressure cooker? It builds up, and the cycle repeats. And that's the same thing that might play out in our lives as well. We might want to lose weight. So we start losing weight because we're 10 kgs overweight, and you lose 1 kg, you lose 2 kgs, you lose 3 kgs. excuse me, what happens to the pressure? The pressure begins to subside. You don't have that drive to lose the weight anymore. So you stop exercising, you stop following your diet, you start eating more donuts and so forth. Next thing you know, you've picked that weight back up and you're back at square one, and the cycle repeats itself over and over again. It might be the same thing with anxiety for you, where there's some things that you know that you should do. So you start practicing these things and your anxiety begins to dissipate somewhat. And as it dissipates, you stop doing those things. And as you stop doing those things, it doesn't happen immediately, right? Over time, the anxiety starts building back up. Then you quickly rush and try and do something to bring it back down. And you keep going in these seesaw wave patterns. What I want to invite you to do today is to practice the things that we talk about, such that it becomes second nature to you, and you can exit the highway of being on the pressure cooker. Now, I'm aware of one thing, is that anxiety might be something that you've had for quite some time, and it's something that can also be resolved in a relatively short space of time. But I'm not working with you one-on-one here. This is just a 1-hour masterclass to give you an overview of what you can do to start moving forward. So you will get massive benefits out of this, but there's only so much that I can cover. I don't want to bombard you with information and just keep going around in circles. There's only so much I can cover in an hour. So while I'm not going to cover everything and go into the nitty-gritty and splitting hairs, what you will get out of this is stuff that you can start using right here and right now. Right. So anxiety, who has anxiety? It's just you, right? Nobody else in the world. I wonder. Oh, look at her. I wonder who she is. Oprah, never heard of her. Oprah Winfrey suffers from anxiety to this day, this very moment. It's manifested in not wanting to speak with some people or feeling awkward with other people. It's something that she's spoken quite openly about. Who else? I have no idea who this is. Taylor Swift. And this is a quote from her. It can feel at times, if you let your anxiety get the better of you, like everybody's waiting for you to really mess up and then you'll be done. She also deals with a lot of anxiety and anxiety disorder from around 2016. I think it's the time she spoke up about it, when she was being bullied online by none other than Kanye West. I have no idea who this is either. This is Adele, right? During one concert, she vomited and then ran off stage and escaped through a fire exit because the anxiety got so bad. And nobody knows who she is, right? She's not that famous, so she's excused. She can feel anxiety. Who's this guy? No idea. And the most decorated Olympic swimmer in US history, Michael Phelps, has had very public struggles with anxiety, depression, and substance abuse. He actually even felt suicidal at some point, right after I think the 2012 Olympics. After it's like going to the moon is what he said. You've gone to the moon, you've done all this, then what's next for you? So he also suffers from anxiety. Even during the pandemic, he was quite outspoken about his anxiety struggles. And this is a person that's done absolutely nothing, right? I mean, he's only got like, what, 1 gold medal, right? So what I'm just trying to show you here is that a lot of people from different walks of life, even people who are high up there, who we think haven't achieved all these, wouldn't have been able to achieve all these things without anxiety, do have anxiety. So you are in very good company if you do feel this. It's not just a few people who are underperformers or ordinary people. Anybody and everybody can and does feel anxiety some of the time. Now, do these sound or look familiar to you? These are some of the responses. I couldn't get all of them in. There would be no space and time. So these are some of the responses that I got from you. Obviously, I didn't say who it's from, when you're filling out the form for this masterclass. And I was asking you, what are some of the ways that anxiety shows up for you? So here we've got overthinking, the reality of the world, life circumstances. These are the causes for some people: fear, pressure, overthinking and trying to control events I don't have control over, thinking about the future and what's going to happen, fear of the unknown. So the one constant thing that I kept seeing is that people mentioned that they thought that their thoughts are the causes of the anxiety, the thoughts that they're thinking, or thinking about the future and things that haven't happened yet. And when I asked you to scale how often you feel anxiety, or rather how much anxiety you feel from a scale of 1 to 10, where 1 is you're feeling 100% calm, and 10 is like you're having a full-blown panic attack. When I averaged out the answers, the average I got was 7. So 7 across all the people that registered is the average. And I'll imagine that that's just a small sample of the entire population. So that's pretty high. I mean, it's not super high, but it is a pretty high level. Now, I don't know if this is necessarily lower because people are going into the public holidays and hump day, going to the weekend, or it's just that time of the year. Typically, anxiety is helpful in that 2 to 5 range, where it's still manageable. You can actually harness the energy of anxiety. When it goes beyond that, it tends to then become unhelpful. So in terms of thinking about the future and what's going to happen, the one thing you know is that the one certainty in life, apart from death, is that things will always change. Now, I'm the first person to admit that I don't like change. I like progress, but unfortunately, there can be no progress without change, right? But I don't jump at the thought of change immediately. But things always change, and that means that we can't rely on things staying the same. The company that we work for, the people that we're around, our children might start taking drugs, global warming might change the planet, there could be a major war, who knows, right? But we can also turn to the fact that things also change to our advantage. And it means that we can look at changes as being temporary instead of being permanent. We can look at setbacks as being temporary instead of being permanent. Good times will follow bad. And when bad times come again, as they will, we can rest assured knowing that they won't last and will be replaced once again with good times. It's that cycle of life. So what I spoke about right now is a lot of people are saying that their thoughts control their emotions and that's what causes them to feel anxious. So this is what people typically think. Something happens in the environment. Someone cuts you off in traffic. Someone doesn't respond to your message immediately. They read the message, but they don't respond to it, right? So something happens. We think something to ourselves like, oh, what an asshole. And then the feeling of anger or resentment then comes. While this might make sense logically, research on brain scans actually show a different story altogether. So here's a short lesson in neuroscience. Our brain is made up of 3 parts. We've got the reptilian brain, which is right there at the base, the brainstem. And this is the part of the brain that just basically regulates everything that goes on in the body. So things like breathing, things like your heart rate, things like your digestion, these are autonomous. You don't have to think about them. The brainstem or reptilian brain handles all those things. The second part of the brain, which is just above the brainstem, which is younger than the brainstem, is the mammalian brain, the limbic system. So this is the part that deals with emotions and motivation. So our emotions are basically tied to the limbic system, the second part of the brain. The third part of the brain, the neocortex, that's the youngest part of the brain, the most developed part of the brain. And this is the part that deals with thinking, with planning, with reasoning, with logic. So those are the 3 parts of the brain. You can think of them as this, for those of you, I'm giving my age away over here, but that doesn't matter. So I'm giving you 3 different examples there of the first one on the left is your Holmes and Watson, right? Holmes is a logical one. Watson is a more reasonable, hey, let's consider the heart of a person. You know, let's not just be logical about this thing. They're human beings at play here. Or we can think of Kirk and Spock. Right, Kirk is the captain. He's the one who makes the emotional decisions, just shoots from the hip, and Spock is the more logical one who thinks things through, the one who is just cold and calculating. And then you've got Mulder and Scully from X-Files, if you ever grew up watching that. So Scully, the Dr. Scully, she's just the logical one. She needs reasons, she needs evidence. And then Mulder's the one who's just, I've got a feeling about this thing. And they had their whole will they, won't they thing going on there as well. That's another story. So under normal circumstances, the emotional brain and the logical brain, just like these examples here, will work together. The emotional brain will be reining the logical brain in from being too cold and calculating, and the logical brain will help the emotional brain, stop the emotional brain from just being too emotional, basically, too black and white in its thinking. It's a bit yin and yang. But there's one thing here, which is the emotional part of the brain. Let me put it this way. The connections between the emotional part of the brain to the logical part of the brain are way, way more than the connections from the logical brain to the emotional brain. What does that mean? It means that our emotional brain can and does hijack the logical brain, the thinking brain. Whenever we feel strong emotions, and really think about this, whenever you feel like when you're in love, what is wrong in the world? Absolutely nothing. When you're angry and you're pissed off, you just see red, right? Doesn't matter what's going on, you're angry. When you feel fear, when you feel worry, when you're feeling these highly aroused emotional states, those emotions color our thoughts. And then the thoughts that we subsequently think are influenced, they're shaped, they're colored by the emotional state that we're in. The implication of this is that it is not negative thoughts that create negative emotions, at least not most of the time. It's the negative emotions that create negative thoughts. So it's not thinking anxious thoughts that actually causes you to become anxious. It's you already being anxious, being in an anxious state, being in an emotionally aroused state that causes you to then have thoughts that are anxious thoughts. Because remember, the emotional brain overrides the thinking brain, and it has more control over that. It's like Spock outranks Kirk. Kirk outranks Spock. Spock is the first officer, and Kirk is the captain. The captain, the emotional one, will always outrank the logical one. That's just how the brain is, because the emotional part of the brain is older and more developed than the thinking part of the brain. This is the younger part of the brain. Although it's technically the most reasonable one, it's the youngest part of the brain, and as such, it gets overrun by the other parts. So think of this way. Why is it that the emotional part of the brain has this ability to override the thinking brain? You're crossing the street, and out of nowhere, this car just comes, it's just moving at 200 km an hour, and it's gonna hit you in the next 2 seconds. Now, if you're to logically think about that, you'd have to stop and think, should I move out the way? I wonder how fast this car is traveling. Will it hit me? No. The amygdala, which is the emotional part of the brain, automatically takes over, instinctively alerts you to the threat, and quickly just forces you to jump out of the way. It'll pump all the cortisol and the adrenaline to then make you move quickly. Your emotional brain has to be faster than your logical brain in order for you to quickly avoid danger. And the more intense the threat is, the more the emotional brain locks all your mental resources on dealing with it, shutting down the higher functioning thinking brain. Now, this is all well and good under ordinary circumstances, but the question is, are you in danger when you feel anxious? Are you in real danger? Do you have lions and predators actually physically chasing you? Well, no, and to some degree, yes. No, because you aren't really facing any real threats to your survival, not on a daily basis. There are no venomous snakes, predators, and crocodiles around every corner, unless you live in Australia. I can guarantee you that's the only exception, right? If you're an Australian, you feel free to feel anxious. I'm just joking. But the emotional brain doesn't make any distinction between a real threat and an imagined or perceived threat. It treats the two things as if they're the same. The fight or flight system responds just the same, which means that fear, tension, nerves, and anxiety that one subsequently feel will be the same as if you're actually really facing a real threat. So real threat or imagined threat, the body just responds the same. It's as if you're facing real danger. But the challenge today is the threats that you face today, are they life-threatening? No, they're not. And this is where modern life has sort of muddled things up a bit. The threats that we face today aren't life-threatening, but our body doesn't know that. Our brains don't know that. They treat the threats as if they are life-threatening, and they respond as such. So the challenge today is that before, if you had a threat, I'm walking in the bush, I hear a lion roaring a kilometer away. My heart starts racing, my palms start sweating, my pupils dilate, and I book out of there. I get to a safe place, or I climb a tree, I get back to the tribe, and what happens is that the body then rests. The body is like, whew, The threat is over. It's a new day. The challenges that we face today aren't so physical. And because they're not so physical, they aren't so easy to identify and they're not so easy to act upon. They are more mental threats than actual physical threats. So what are these modern threats? Things like financial worries, work pressures, deadlines, strained relationships. And by strained relationships, I'm not saying that people are fighting. I'm saying that we're not communicating face to face. People are communicating with people hundreds of k's away in different countries, in different cities, and things get lost in translation, right? We're more in touch, but not really communicating as such. A text message and a phone call sometimes doesn't quite suffice as actually looking at the person's physiology, getting a sense of where they're at, and really connecting with them. So as such, even if you're not fighting the person, relationships can just get strained just through space and time. Fears of not living up to standards depicted on social media, poor health habits, deadlines, all these things, when you add them up, when you add all these stresses up, the body treats them as if they're real stresses. Now, some of them are small, some of them are large, but when you put them all together, it actually has an impact on our bodies and on our minds. And that's where the anxiety starts building up from these stresses. So let's look at this thing called stress. We all know what stress is. I'm not going to break it down too much, but what is stress? It's any pressure or buildup of pressures. So it might be physiological, it might be psychological. It doesn't matter. If it's a stress, it's a stress. And the main thing is that it's stress if it's too much for a person to cope with comfortably. If you have any pressure that is physical or psychological that you can actually cope with, it's no longer stress, right? It's just being stretched. And these are relative from person to person. It means that what's a stressor for one person is not going to be a stressor for another person. Whenever we're thinking in very binary terms, in all or nothing thinking, seeing only what fits our emotional state and not seeing the wider context and the nuances, then the chances are our thinking brain has been hijacked by our emotional brain. And we start looking at things as threats or not a threat. A person that is performing, a person that has to present a meeting, right, might feel a certain level of stress, but another person might be a stand-up comedian who goes in front of drunk audiences every night and they don't feel any stress, right? It's a relative thing. You can't say just because this thing is a stressor for me, it's going to be a stressor for another person, and vice versa. Just because it's not a stressor for another person doesn't mean that it's not going to be a stressor for you. It differs from person to person. So when you're talking about anxiety, there's specifically 3 elements to anxiety that we'll be looking at in terms of how we can then address these and then how we can start overcoming them. The first is the physiological aspect of anxiety. How this plays up is you might have tension in your body, tension in terms of a headache, an inability to relax. You might have disturbed sleep. You might have a change in even your eating habits. You might be eating significantly more than you usually eat, eating foods that you typically don't eat, or not even eating at all, a loss of appetite. They could be emotional. So this could be imagining a catastrophe, just some kind of impending doom, a sense of apprehension, anticipating, anticipatory fear. Or it can be cognitive. That's the more thought-based thing, right? Negative thoughts, poor concentration. So those are 3 ways that anxiety usually plays out: physiological, emotional, and cognitive. And you find that by actually addressing either one of these 3, you'll address all 3 of them. And if you can address all 3 of them at once, that's even better. But of all these things, between the physiological, the emotional, the cognitive, which do you think is the first and the best place to start? And I know that you already know this inherently. Drum roll, please. It is going to be the physiological, isn't it? You change your physiology. By changing your physiology, you change your life. You're going to be changing your biochemistry. It's the first and the best place to start. Why? Because you can't do things that affect the body that will not affect the mind in some way. So the first thing you want to learn how to do is how to practice emotional first aid. I don't know if you remember this from primary school, or maybe it's just me and my memory. The first aid has 3 elements to it: A, B, C. The A stands for airway, B stands for breathing, and then C stands for the circulation. That's the blood. Those are the 3 things that you look at when you're looking at rendering first aid to a person, right? We can also do the same thing for ourselves. in terms of emotional first aid, A, B, C. A being awareness. Be aware of your body and whatever it is that you're feeling. Being able to name it and saying, I am feeling anxious right now, rather than saying I'm being swept by the wind. Be aware of when and how you feel anxious. When you do, step into the second thing, which is your breath. Why the breath? Let's look at it this way. What's the key to energy in your body? And I'm not being esoteric, this is just purely practical stuff. The key to energy in your body, have you ever had a good night's rest? You slept 8.5 hours and you woke up and you were dirt tired. Don't respond, I know you've felt that before, right? Have you ever had a good meal where, like, we're now talking like Christmas meal, right? You just had this, you had your chicken and dumpling and pies and all these things, and just had this nice big carb-loaded fatty meal, and afterwards you're like, yeah, I'm ready to climb Mount Everest. I got so much energy. No, right? Right after that, you want to go and sleep. You're like, I'm never eating like this ever again. Then what happens? Someone's like, more apple pie? And you're like, yes, please. It's just the nature of it, right? So it's also not food. And it's also not sleep. Just for the sake of time, let me just jump into it. How long can you go for without sleep? It's roughly about 4 days before you actually just die, right? Obviously, it's not recommended, but we can go for a very long time, definitely more than a day without sleep. How long can you go for without food? The body can go for up to 40 days without food. Obviously, the body is eating itself, it's eating all the fat and the muscle, but you definitely can go without food for 40 days. Or let's use the analogy of a day. Can you go a day without sleep? It's not ideal, but yes. Can you go a day without food? Once again, unless you're not consciously fasting, yeah, you can, right? How long can you go for without water? You can go for about 3 days before you die. Could you go for a day without water? Yeah, you could more or less get by, right? Wouldn't be ideal, but you get by. How long can you go for without breathing? Interesting, right? Can you go a day without breathing? Yes, you can. It's called death. So the breath is so important in terms of the body. It regulates our autonomic nervous system, our parasympathetic and sympathetic nervous system. So the more you get conscious of your breathing and consciously slow your breath down, specifically on the out breath, the more the parasympathetic nervous system kicks in. That's the rest and relax part of the body, the rest and digest part of the body, and it allows you to start healing the body, to start removing those toxins, to start calming down your body, and to allow the thinking brain to come in line. So there's 2 methods you can use here in terms of learning how to just relax and calm yourself down. The first is the 7-11 breathing method, where you inhale through the nose, not through the mouth, inhale through the nose to the count of 7, then you exhale slowly through the mouth to the count of 11. If 7-11 is too much for you, you can try a 5-9 or even a 3-5, where you breathe in for 3, breathe out for 5. But the trick here is always breathe out through the mouth and make sure that the out breath is longer and slower than the in breath. You can even do this right now. Find your pulse. For me, I find it difficult to use my wrist. I usually put my finger on my temple. There's like a little groove there right in front of the ear. You can usually feel the heartbeat. And just notice how your heart rate is right now. Now take a breath through the nose slowly for a count of 3. Hold it, notice your breath. And now slowly, guys, slowly through your mouth. Do this again with more intention. Notice the heart rate through the nose. Now slowly through the mouth. One more time. In through the nose. Hold it. Now slowly through the mouth. You notice that as you're breathing out slowly, your heart rate actually calms down a little bit. It's already kicking in. Now practicing doing this many times a day will allow you to start getting calm. Remember that thing that I said at the beginning of this masterclass, is that It's not about whether or not you know whether or not to do things that help you to become calm. I'm not interested in whether or not you know the things. What I'm interested in is, are you doing those things? That's the most important part. This is so simple because it doesn't require a phone. It doesn't require any special equipment. It just requires your body and your nose. And you can do this anywhere. No one even has to know that you're doing this. Practice this. Just do this 10 breaths 3 times a day, and you notice for yourself, you'll probably want to go on for longer and longer. Learning how to relax is one of the best things, if not the single best. If you get nothing else out of this masterclass, please take this. Learn how to relax. Learn how to relax. When you relax, you also find it's easier to think clearly. Your anxiety has a way of clouding the brain, right? Relaxation improves your mood, includes your optimism, your sense of self-confidence, and allows you to see situations differently. And also see that maybe that thing that you thought was a problem, even though you can't necessarily solve it, you might actually, because when you're calm, you see things differently. You might actually see that it's not even a problem at all, right? It might be a challenge or a situation or an opportunity, but that's only something that you see once you relax. So I encourage you, relax as much as possible. Another option you can use is the clenched fist method. So here, just take your fist and hold them to the side of your body. And I want you to make balls by the side of your body, really tight fists, right? Really make a tight, tight fist. Imagine all that tension, all that worry, all that fear and anxiety just going into these fists and making them tighter and tighter and tighter and tighter. And just picture all that stress going there, making it tighter and tighter and tighter, and almost like feeling your nails digging into your palms type of thing. And make them really super tight and let them open and let that relaxation flow through the body. That's it. How does that feel? Okay, that's another thing that you can do to practice. Now, these are just 2 methods that you can use to learn how to relax yourself. Find what works for you. It doesn't have to be yoga. It doesn't have to be meditation, although those are really great places to start. It could be guided meditation, guided visualizations on YouTube, also a great place to start. There's tons of information out there. But whatever form you choose, if it's taking a walk in the park, if it's just walking your dog, taking your kid, putting him or her in the pram and walking them, right, for 10, 15 minutes, listen to music, dancing to music. We become such boring adults. We don't dance anymore, right? Dancing, working out, whatever form it takes for you, practice it. That's my invitation to you, practice it. Another thing that you can do to change your physiology, this is one of my favorite ones, is just laughing. Because when you laugh, you're changing what you're focusing on, you're changing how you feel, and you're changing your body. It's like a free trifecta, right? Laughing about 5 times a day is a very great way to relieve stress and tension in your body. What I actually just do is whenever I find a funny video on YouTube, I just create a folder, a playlist, and I just add it to there. Whenever I want to laugh, I just go back to those. I've got probably like 90 videos that I've saved up there. Varying types of lengths, doesn't matter. And I just go and watch those things. After a few minutes, you're just laughing your ass off, right? Learning how to laugh becomes also a practice, and the more you laugh, the easier it is to then laugh. And you find even more things to laugh about. So that's also a very powerful way of changing your physiology. So the second thing you can do is thinking straight. So once you've calmed yourself down, the reason I didn't start with thinking straight is if you haven't changed your physiology, if you haven't calmed down, and you're just changing your thoughts from a highly aroused emotional point of view, physical point of view rather, is only going to give you more physically, emotionally aroused thoughts again. So you want to calm down. Once you calm, then the thoughts that come naturally will become way better thoughts. Not necessarily positive, but at least at the very minimum, they'll be neutral. But jumping to just think about something or challenging the thought without having calmed down first is a little counterintuitive. Now, if you are calm, and you do find yourself thinking unhelpful thoughts, great place to be. First thing you want to do is challenge any negative thoughts. Those of you that have joined me for previous masterclasses know that I'm always talking about this. Challenge negative thoughts. Don't let those thoughts sit in your mind rent-free. Ask whether they're realistic or whether they represent a merely biased view of events. Challenging unrealistic thoughts will help you to disempower them, and it'll push them out of your mind altogether. You reframe. The second thing that you can do is to scale the anxiety. By scaling the anxiety, it's something that I did with you when you joined this masterclass. I said, how anxious do you feel? in terms of thinking straight. When you do this, it allows you to reframe the thing from just being a feeling to it then being a number. Why is that so important? When you make this thing a number rather than a feeling, it puts a limit on it. Does that make sense? If you say on a scale of 1 to 10, it means that I know that my anxiety cannot go beyond a 10. 10 is the highest it'll ever be, and 1 is the calmest I'll be. It's put a fence around that thing already, metaphorically speaking. So you put a limit on how high you can go. You're working within a range rather than saying, oh, I'm so anxious. You just say, oh, on a scale of 1 to 10, I'm about a 7. And working with a 7 is way more better than working with some undefined number out there. So it allows you to change the thing from a feeling to a number. So you disassociate. Second thing is it puts a limit on it. And the third thing that scaling does is you go into an observing state. And it's a simple enough thing, but the beauty of this is that you get your thinking brain back into play. The whole idea of just asking yourself that question of on a scale of 1 to 10, where am I at? You have to use the thinking brain to ask that question and to answer that question. And the more the thinking brain is being used, the less the emotional brain is being used. So it gets you to start thinking straight. So scaling, once again, very simple thing that you can do, and it works. Third thing you can do in terms of thinking straight is to take a wider perspective. By wider perspective, I mean, ask yourself this simple question: what else could this mean? Something happens, you send a message to someone, they don't respond immediately, or they give you a response you weren't expecting, or they act funny, and you're feeling off. Rather than saying, oh, this person is a douchebag, or they've got it in for me, or they don't like me, whatever the case may be, ask yourself the simple question: what else could this mean? And after you've answered that question, ask yourself that question again, and what else could this mean? The whole idea behind this is that you're getting the thinking brain working. Now, you might think that the answer that you give might be negative. No, they won't be, because you've calmed yourself down. But the main thing about this is to just take on a wider perspective rather than a narrow perspective. And the answers that you give don't even have to be positive, and you don't have to believe any of them. The whole idea behind this exercise is just to say, oh, there are other possibilities. I'm supposed to meet a person at 6 o'clock for dinner. Maybe it's your husband or wife, or your girlfriend or boyfriend. It's 6 o'clock, you sat down in a restaurant somewhere, you made an appointment, and they're not there. You call them on their phone, you message them, the message doesn't go through, they're not answering their phone. They're cheating on me, right? Or they're not interested, they don't care, they're still in the office. What else could this mean? Maybe their phone died. What else could this mean? Maybe they're in such a hurry to get here that they don't have time to actually respond. What else could this mean? Maybe there's some emergency that came up that they couldn't get back to me about, and they'll get back to me when they get the chance, right? Now, none of these things are true. Maybe one of them is, who knows? But the whole idea is just to take a wider view and to stop saying it means just because this happened, it means that. You're allowing yourself to break away from that pattern. Final thing that you can do in terms of thinking straight is the power of the word yet. Y-E-T, yet. Something happens and you say, when you find yourself using words like less or never or always, that's usually very emotional type of thinking. I'll never find a husband. I'll always be single. I'll never get my business up and running. Why does this always happen to me? Those type of questions and those type of phrases, the best way to counter those is to use the word yet. By using the word yet, you're presupposing that at some point in the future, things will be different. I haven't found a partner yet. I haven't gotten my business to where I wanted to be yet, but I'm getting there, right? I haven't lost the weight yet, but I will lose it. Just by adding the word yet, you've changed the energy of that entire statement. So that's a powerful way of learning how to challenge your negative thinking. The final thing that you can do here is to use your imagination wisely. Use your imagination wisely. Imagination allows us to look at what worked in the past and apply that to a solution. And maybe some modifications, we can find new solutions to a current challenge or things that might happen in the future. So just as pilots learn to first fly by working on the controls in the simulator before they actually go and fly on real planes, we can actually do the same things. We can rehearse probable outcomes to situations and test those things out for size. It's been said that worry is a misuse of the imagination, where you're taking something that hasn't happened yet and you don't know how it's going to happen, the timings of those things, the intensity of those things, the frequency of those things. You don't know any of those things, and you're treating those things as if they happen right now and that they're going to happen. You control your imagination, and by learning how to calm down, thinking straight, you can then tap into this part here, which is the most powerful, seeing things the way that you want them to be and trying those things out for size. So imagination allows you to, it's like a reality simulator, just like pilots have their flight simulator. We've got our own reality simulator where we can actually sit down and practice positive mental rehearsal. I remember I dated a lady some years ago who was a drama teacher, student, and director, and she told me something interesting. She said that the people that are doing fine arts, those people that went into dancing, one of the things that they're actually taught to do is to visualize. They actually teach them, the classes there where they actually sit down and they say, this is how you visualize your performance. Visualize yourself watching the thing, visualize yourself jumping, spinning, turning, watch it as if you're watching yourself on the screen, and then step into your body and then re-experience that thing. Feel every muscle, feel every twist, feel every jump, feel your breath, and replay that performance as if it's happening in real time. They train them to do that. Why? Because if they're physically going out there and performing all the time, they're going to wear their bodies down and they won't be able to perform when the time comes. So visualization is actually not just things used by sports people and golfers and pilots. It's used by a whole bunch of peak performers, and you can use this for yourself as well. So I want to invite you right now to just slow down, right? Take a deep breath through the nose and hold that breath. And exhale slowly out through the mouth. Now, what I'm going to do with you is not hypnosis and it's not meditation. It's just guided visualization. And you notice for yourself how you feel afterwards. So wherever you are, just close your eyes and bring to mind a time where you're going to be doing something that's going to happen soon in the future, an upcoming event or situation or some kind of performance. Maybe it's an interview, maybe it's a date that you can have with a person, or even just a situation where you feel anxious, where anxiety comes up for you in that situation and you want to feel better about that thing right now. Now, if you can't think of one right now, that's fine. Just imagine one in the past, something that's happened in the past, just to give yourself a blueprint of how to do this. All right, so just take another deep breath through the nose and slowly out through the mouth. And make those fist balls again on the side of your body. And just imagine all that tension and all that worry going into those fists, making them tighter and tighter and tighter. That's it. Making them super tight. When you can't make them any tighter anymore, just unfurl those fists, that's it. And let that relaxation flow through the body. Just as that fist can open, your brain is doing the same thing. And your body is just relaxing. Now, think of the situation in the future and think about how it is that you want to be in the situation. And get a sense of watching yourself, maybe on a huge TV screen, like a home movie screen, just looking and feeling relaxed and at ease and acting with calm confidence as that event takes place. And really observe yourself carefully. Notice what it is about the you in that future event that lets the you here, watching, know the you there in the future is calm, relaxed, comfortable, and maybe even in the flow, in the zone. That's it. Just letting that mind be like a pool of water. You know, when a pool of water is calm and still, it can accurately reflect reality. And just pay attention to the body language of that future you. The way you stand, sit, and move with assurance. The way you gesture, the way your face just radiates this deep, calm confidence. And watch that event right the way through, from the very first moment to its satisfactory conclusion. And notice what it's like to be thinking about this upcoming situation while feeling totally calm and relaxed. And when your mind has learned everything that it needs to learn, just imagine stepping into that future you. That's it. Standing up and walking right into that screen. Stepping into that future you being them, and them being you right now. Notice what that feels like in your body. That's it. This is calm assurance. This calmness that's flowing through you. That's it. Maybe growing a little bit stronger, a little bit deeper. That's it. And bring yourself back to the present. Feeling a little more calmer, a little more relaxed, and a lot more confident. Fantastic. So that's something that you can do for yourself whenever and wherever you want to. Practice getting into the habit of practicing all the things that we've spoken about today. Remember, there's 3 components to anxiety: physiological, the cognitive, and the emotional. Learning how to change your body, calming yourself down, laughter, exercise, whatever form it takes for you. Learning how to challenge those negative thoughts that come in your brain and see things from a wider perspective. And finally, get into the habit of rehearsing whatever it is that you want to do, rehearsing it over and over again until it becomes second nature. I guarantee you that you do this over and over again, it becomes second nature for you, and your anxiety will drop down. Some of you will see an immediate change. Some of you will see the change more subtle, but keep doing it, and you notice that over time it becomes stronger and stronger. It's a lot like going to a physiotherapist or a chiropractor. Sometimes they can look at what you're doing and say, hey, this is what you're doing wrong, and crack, boom, you're fixed, right? And other times it's like, no, okay, you're gonna have to go home and practice these exercises and these stretches for the next 6 weeks, but you will see a difference. The main thing is just to keep at it. And whatever differences that you see, let those act as encouragement for you to keep at it. So my last parting thing for you here is, you are not your anxiety. You are not your anxiety. Everybody, right? Everybody, I'll say that one more time. Everybody feels some degree of anxiety some of the time. I'll say that again. Everybody feels some degree of anxiety some of the time. Some people it's a lot, some people it's a little, but everyone feels it. It comes and goes for everyone. If you think of times when you've been relaxed or had fun, or you're reading a book, remember that you're not your anxiety. Anxiety was never in that picture at all, right? You only felt anxiety when something happened in your life, or you started practicing it and then it became second nature. So you are not your anxiety. There's been many times in life when that anxiety was just not there at all for you. And anxiety is not a sign of weakness. It's a response to stress. That's the one thing I want you to also take away. Anxiety is not a sign of weakness. It's a response to stress. You are not your anxiety. It's something that you do. And because it's something that you do, and because it's something that you do, it's a habit. Because it's a habit. By habit, I'm not putting blame on you and saying, oh, you've made yourself anxious. No. Habits can be picked up unconsciously. Habits can be things that we haven't even thought about. Think of half the habits that you have. Do you know how you started those habits? Or is it just stuff that's been passed down? Or stuff that you didn't even think about? Habit just means that it's something that you've been doing, regardless of the cause. It's a habit. And because it's a habit, it can be changed. And learning how to practice these things until they become second nature is what makes a difference. Going back to what I said right at the beginning of this call, of this masterclass, I said, do you really not know how to manage anxiety? Maybe in some instances that might be the case. How quickly can you learn those things? Probably within 5 minutes. It's not about the information. It's about what you do with that information. So even if these tips aren't things that you want to follow, that's fine. Maybe there are things that you want to follow. Find what works for you. And whenever you do, 100% run with those things up until it becomes second nature. Rome wasn't built in a day, but if you keep at it, remember this is a practice, it's a habit, you'll learn how to have the habit of calmness, the habit of resourcefulness, the habit of seeing things from a wider perspective, and then your whole life will be different. So thank you for joining this masterclass. I've been very conscious of time, and yes, I hit just under the hour mark, which was just my goal. You have a fantastic weekend. If there are any questions that have come up in the chats, please let me know. I'll see. Okay, Nyaki says that just need your body. No, it's fantastic. If there's any questions, guys, feel free to ask away. Otherwise, I'll share a link with you, which is there in the chat. If you want to sign up for a chat with me, a clarity session, it's a free clarity session for 40 minutes where we get clarity around whatever the issue is that you're facing and helping you to start making inroads in that issue, on that challenge that you're facing, then sign up for the class. Did I see Aya just unmute herself? It's fine. I'm not going to call it out. So.
No, I was just going to thank you.
Beg your pardon?
I was just going to thank you.
Oh, fantastic. You're welcome.
Thank
it's
you
my
so
pleasure.
much, Zen. Thank you.
So guys, have a fantastic weekend and I wish you all the best.
You too. Bye-bye. Thanks. Bye.
Thank you, Zen. This was fantastic.
You're welcome.
Really appreciate it. Have a lovely weekend and lovely evening.